Joel, wake up.
I'm here. I'm here. I'm here.
Yes. Hey, everybody at home. Thank you for coming by. I know that some of you guys, it's kind of late. Some of you, it's early morning, like me. And for some folks, like Mr. Larson, it's midday. It's perfect. What time is it there? It's like let's see, like 2 o'clock. No,
3 p.m.
3 p.m. Oh, I was close. I was
All
close. We did it. But
close
anyway,
enough.
yes, right. Well, everybody who's in the chat and watching the stream, thank you for spending time to show up this morning. Again, my name is Rob AJG. You are here learning about Artifact, and my guest today is Pro Tour champion, is our closed beta draft winner, snuck in there on tie breaks, and then got him. Uh,
Gotta happen one time,
that's
right?
right, got him. And this is Mr. Joel Larsson. How are you doing, sir?
I'm all good. I'm all good. I have my, well, I guess midday coffee, not morning coffee, and I'm pretty chill. I had a pretty quiet day. Played some Artifact, played some Magic, did some essay work, and yeah, I'm all good. How about you?
Well, I can say that I haven't gotten to play any Artifact this morning, and I that makes me sad. It makes me sad when I don't get to play Artifact as soon as I wake up. So normally and for everybody at home, the reason that I want to be playing as much Artifact as I can is this weekend we have another closed beta draft tournament, and so everybody's kind of prepping for that. We're not telling you the prizes or anything on that side, but we definitely are all kind of prepping for this draft tournament. But today I wanted to talk about just the draft in general, because this is going to be the first time that we really have been able to talk about the nuts and bolts of draft. Because for everybody in the closed beta who appreciates the fact that they're in closed beta, we go out of our way to make sure we don't say stuff we're not supposed to say. So they
It's
gave
been
us,
kind of tricky, for sure.
yeah, and it's kind of hard because on one side you want to talk about it, but the other side you really respect that Valve gave you a chance. So, but what I wanted to have you do today, if you could, is for everybody who doesn't know, again, I know I said it like 2 minutes ago, but you'll actually won the last closed beta draft tournament. And can you talk a little bit about just your experience in the draft and then top eight?
Right. Okay, so the way we did it is we had two separate drafts to decide the Swiss portion, right? So we drafted twice, and then we had a top eight draft on Sunday. Uh, so 7 rounds, they won. And in the first draft, I drafted this, I don't know, 11 out of 10 absurd deck where sometimes you get two of this. Like, so difference between draft and constructed is in draft, you can get two of the same hero. And for some heroes, that's worse. And from some heroes, that gets very, very absurd. So I got two of the hero which cannot be named because I don't think it's revealed yet. But it's very good to have two of them. It's very good. So that was a pretty easy clean sweep. I think I went 3-0, 6-0 in games or something like that. It was just super easy. And then I drafted another deck that was more, well, nuts and bolts, like you say. It was okay, but it definitely had its holes, and it was like a 4 out of 10 or 5 out of 10 or whatever. The packs were kind of hard to draft, and it was kind of hard to see where you wanted to go with it. But it turned out okay, and I think I went 2-2. And then there were tiebreakers for top eight, and we literally had the same tiebreakers on the first tiebreakers as another contestants, and it went over to game win percentage for the top eight. So it was as close as it can get for the top eight. Yeah, so that's how that went. Then in the top eight, I think I had a pretty medium deck also, but the rest of the players also had kind of medium decks, where my deck really shined, if not if the other decks weren't too powerful. So that kind of worked out. Yeah.
Well, so you said that your deck for top 8 was kind of medium. Why do you? I mean, I guess without maybe saying all the cards, but you said it was just because of the way that the kind of the draft, the how it came about, right? Like the pool you got wasn't that great because in draft it's kind of like this weird combination of draft and sealed, right? Because like it's
Sure. Because you're not actually passing to anybody.
right. So why did
The
you?
way the draft works is that, if you mind me explaining, is that in the drafts there's AIs where they pre-program the AI to draft packs, and they've drafted tons of packs with different parameters of each card, and they try to draft decks. And when you pick, because you pick 2 cards out of every pack, when you pick 2 cards, you get a pack which an AI has picked 2 cards out of also that you get passed. However, unlike, for example, Eternal or whatever, you don't get packs from the same AI player trying to draft the same deck, but you get from different AIs drafting cards. So if I pick 2 cards, I get a pack from one AI, then I take 2 cards out of that pack, then I get a pack that's another AI, not like the first one, has picked 2 cards out of, and etc. etc. So that's how it goes. It's kind of weird, but it's interesting. But it kind of works also.
Yeah, it's weird because for people who have done drafts or other drafts in other games, you're used to, well, I guess with the exception of Hearthstone, but like with Magic, you're used to having a person next to you. Left, right. You're sitting at a table of 8-ish people. Like at the Pro Tour, so at the top level, it's 8 people, and they may be sometimes a little bit less. But the whole point is that you all are dealing with the same card pool. Like everybody brings 3 packs to the table, so you're dealing with this 24 pack pool, and most people's decks are in the same power level. I mean, with exceptions, but you can get a feel for what it's like, right? Sometimes you have a draft pod that is really aggro because a couple of the open packs might have been really deep on aggressive cards. So with Artifact, it's a little bit different for everybody at home because, like he said, right now it's all virtual. So you've got these drafters out there who are computers, right? And when it launches, the idea is to make it come from real people. Like eventually we will wean out all of the AI, and every pack that gets passed to you comes from another human in that exact draft position. So
exactly. So that is going to be changed. Like you're saying, there's going to be coming packs from people, and if by any means the packs would run out, they would then compensate with AI packs afterwards.
right.
But I don't think that will almost ever happen. But like you said, yeah.
Continue. Yeah. But so why do you think your deck for top 8 was, kind of mediocre? I mean, obviously, even if you don't talk about specific cards, like when...
So it didn't have. There's a couple of heroes that are definitely tier S or tier 0, if you want to call them, which are definitely a lot better than others. Say Luna, for example, which is revealed is an absurd hero, right? I didn't have any of those absurd heroes, and I was also 3 colors. Sometimes in draft, the way the packs goes is that you get to, maybe you open a very strong hero, say Phantom Assassin, and then you pick a few black cards, but you don't really get a lot of black cards, and then you get some, other colors, and then you have to pick those, and then in the end you don't have enough heroes to kind of compensate everything. Like you don't want to play too many basic heroes, especially with the same color. So sometimes you can splash a few cards. Say I splash PA in the top 8 as my 3rd color because her card is very powerful. She has great stats, and I had a few very powerful black cards that I definitely want to put in my deck. However, what happens is that when you try to regulate all different lanes, it's kind of hard to play the cards in sequence that you would wish, because it's easier for your opponent to remove certain heroes to make your game plan more awkward. And that's true for every case where you play more colors, more than one, but especially so in draft, and especially so if you play 3 colors. So that's why it was, I felt it was kind of medium, and it wasn't that proactive of a deck, but when almost everybody in the top 8 that I played had similar decks that were all 3 colors and they weren't extremely strong, my deck kind of stood out over those decks.
Yeah, I was looking at the list that you had, and I was going to ask you. So there's some people who, because I did a bunch of interviews with the people in closed beta to kind of find out their strategy on draft. Because I'm fairly new to the closed beta. Just because I'm a degenerate, I put a bunch of hours in, but that isn't always the answer. Like, it's always nice to be able to have content, and that's our content, right? You have to like go to somebody. It's like old school when Magic first started. Like, there's no like website to go to. You have to like, you have to like make friends with people and be social and try not to be a creeper. Like, excuse me, Mr. Life Coach, could you tell me a little bit about your strategy? Anyway, so, but a lot of people swear up and down that they do not play 3-color and that they avoid it like the plague. Right. I saw that you're definitely not on that train, and a lot of the people in top 8 weren't either. But why? What makes you want to splash for a 3rd color, and then how many cards do you usually play in that 3rd color?
The reason why I would want to splash is that first off, it's like a very strong hero that adds very strong cards to the deck, because whenever you put a hero in your deck, an artifact, whether it's from draft or constructed, they automatically put in 3 cards into your deck. So you can have a very weak hero that puts in less strong cards, like Rix, for example. You don't want to put 3 Rix cards in your deck, even though that, like Rix, for example, that has rapid deployment, which means he comes back all the time, makes it easier for him to splash green cards, for example, because then it's harder to kind of nuke that hero over and over, so you never get to play your cards. However, the card he puts into your deck is very weak. So it's kind of, back and forth between those 2 parameters. And it also has to do whether you have maybe first picked some very strong cards in that color, for example. Say that you get Time of Triumph or Spring the Trap or any powerful cards like that. Or, for example, Lich is a perfect example too. He adds Chain Frost to your deck, which is an extremely powerful card in draft. So it's just fine to play Lich on your own, for example. The hero has to be specifically strong, and it definitely helps if you get a few very powerful cards of that color. And I prefer not to splash anyways, even though I have the option if I get enough good heroes in my main colors as it is. For example, it's fine for me to play a couple of basic heroes, but if I already am playing a basic hero, I would prefer to splash a few powerful cards in another color to play a second one. And that has basically to do the same with every color. Say I have 2 and 2, like 2 blue heroes and 2 green heroes. I'll just play a basic green or blue hero and put in my deck instead of splashing, because it's not worth it to that extent.
Right, and that's what I was kind of hinting at, is there's definitely not to say a strategy, but I think it's just common knowledge, is if you open one of the S tier heroes, like in any pack, I mean, we're talking like, it could be, if it's the last pack, pick one, and you open one of the busted heroes, you're probably just going to take it and splash it anyway. Like,
a lot of the time, yeah. I mean, there's definitely cards that you can pick over it, I think. I don't go out of my way to pick splashed heroes, honestly. I'll pick a very powerful hero in the early packs to have a higher chance of actually moving into that color. But if it's later in the packs, I'm not going to first pick it. If I see it maybe mid-pack, then I'll pick it. If I'm seeing that I will get a random hero in the 2 last picks, and there's probably a higher chance that I will play this splash powerful hero, then I'll do it.
Yeah, and I mean, the reason we're saying splash for people in the chat is splash. Normally in draft, you're playing 2 colors, and you can play them equally. You can play whatever denomination you choose. What we say when we say splash, it means that it's just a little bit of that color. So it'll be your 2 main colors, and then you'll have a 3rd color that maybe has the hero, which will give you their 3 signature cards, and then you may play a handful of other cards. And handful is probably too many. That's 5. But like, you could even play just two, right? 2, anywhere between 1 and 4 extra cards, because Time of Triumph is a really good example where like you might play a Legion commander, get 3 duels, and then play 1 Time of Triumph, because it's worth it, right? Like, and because you got to set up Time of Triumph anyway, it's not like something you're just gonna play on turn 4, and you have to have heroes in the, there's a lot of stuff to it. So splashing cards that require a lot of setup for me tend to be a little bit easier than splashing cards that I need on mana turn 5 or mana turn 4 or something to that effect. But
Yeah.
when you're doing a draft, what are you looking for after the S tier heroes?
Can you repeat that
Oh,
last
that's
question?
okay.
Sorry.
No, what I was saying is when you're putting your draft together. So let's say for this weekend, you open up your pack. It doesn't have one of the top tier heroes. It doesn't have, well, like we said, Luna.
Right.
It doesn't have that.
So before the tournament kind of made a list of heroes which I preferred to pick over almost anything in the early packs. There's usually between 1 to 3 or 1 to 5 heroes that you pick almost over every other card. In like opening new packs or in the first free packs or whatnot. And then I'll definitely pick those heroes over almost anything. But then when you go lower, I'll maybe pick them a little bit later or hope to get something else better. And then there's heroes that I'll prefer not to play over basic heroes, actually, that I think are generally worse than a basic hero. And that's especially common when it comes to Black and Debbie, as it's lovingly called. I think it's called Riley the Cunning.
Yes,
maybe?
it has an actual name.
Yeah, it has an actual name. Yeah, that hero is really good to be basic. So, for example, when you're Black, it's fine to. You don't have to pick up lesser, stronger Black heroes, and you can focus more on picking good Black cards because you can put 1 to 2 Debbies in your deck and you'll be fine because that card is pretty good. So it's different for every color. Say, for example, green, which I prefer to draft. I think it's the best color for draft. I was green in all 3 of my drafts in the tournament that I won. I have a lot more heroes that I pick over almost everything because I prefer to almost not force it, but semi-force it.
Yeah, and I think the good thing about green is you've got the hero, like even the basic hero, right? Like it comes with, like, having creeps is very, I guess I'm trying to get to creep evaluation is it's a very important, and what I've seen across the board in a lot of these decks is there's a lot of creeps in these decks. And I didn't know that at first, that was a thing. I was just trying to play super control decks every time in draft and not a lot of creeps. And like I said, what I've seen is that most decks have a large concentration of their 25 that, the 25 non-signature cards that are creeps. How do you feel about that?
Well, so creeps are very good at. Creeps are just great, right? they're just good cards in the game, basically. They're good at pushing a lane ahead. A lot of them actually scale, especially green ones. They get better every turn they're in play. And they're kind of hard to remove. In Constructed, where there's more ways to remove tons of creeps, like AoE effects, and then creeps get a lot worse because they're harder to protect. But when those cards are kind of harder to get, as in draft, creeps have a high tendency to kind of run away with the game, especially the late ones. And that's also because draft is generally a lot slower than normal constructed games, where it's kind of harder to punish opponents that are stumbling, and some decks clearly are playing some defensive basic heroes that aren't great at punishing your opponent, etc. So creeps and late game gets better. And green also has great late game. They have these huge, which are, I guess, also creeps, these Thunder Packs and Thunder Hide Alphas that are just enormous. And if you're very lucky, you can maybe get an Emissary of Quorum. And those kind of take over the game in draft. So that makes green better. And why green? Okay, so to spin further on this, green has a few heroes that come with creeps as their card, so to say. They give you 3 creeps in your deck. For example, Treant Protector or Lycan, they have these amazing 4-mana creep that you put in your deck. And since creeps are already better and these heroes are already good enough for constructed, they even get better in draft. So That's the main thing for green, I think. And green is also, besides from creeps, they're very good at kind of getting small advantages over time. And since draft is slower, it's kind of easier to get that. And for example, Enchantress is great at doing that. She regenerates creeps beside you, and it makes it so that you're slowly winning your lane. And with her card that gives armor to an entire lane, that gives you a small advantage for every turn that's going to be in play. So all of those kind of tendencies makes green a lot better.
Well, yeah,
Um,
and the thing too is that when you're playing green and you have these huge creeps, you get to strategize where you put them. So if your
yeah,
opponent has one or two slays in their deck, you don't want to put your Thunderhide Alpha on a lane that has a black hero. Like you're gonna put it where you know that it's going to be not invulnerable, but it's going to have to die to regular damage. It's not going to just get one carded out of the game. And the same thing goes for your going wide strategies. Like you're saying, if you come with a bunch of good 4-drops, that's insane, because
yeah,
now you can immediately
truly.
you start playing creatures that are going to get better over time, and you get to choose where they go. So it's where people kind of complain about RNG. They say, "Oh, well, these creeps come in," and now, granted, yes, like having the ability to, if you could choose where your creeps came in, your 2/4s every turn, it would add a whole
Mhm.
nother layer to the game. But it's usually about those
Like
4-drops,
especially here, for
right?
example.
Yeah, exactly. Like the special hero that does that. But being able to have a 4-drop means that you can actually really control the board a lot better, because
Yeah.
now you'll know that you can place it in most of the time, not most of the time, but a lot of the time, these 4-drops that you place in front of a melee creep will kill
Mhm.
it. Because like sometimes you'll get an arrow that comes over to it, you can kill it, but it gets better, like you said. Like it's the first turn, it may not be able to kill a creep on its own, but the next turn and a turn after, now it's like performing like a hero, and
Yeah.
having hero advantage is very good. So, can you talk a little bit about managing heroes in limited? Like, are you trying to keep them on the board all the time? Do you care if they die? Like, how do you think about that?
Uh, so I think that's a difficult question, right? I think as far as I've come to I don't care as much if my heroes die. I prefer if my opponent don't get the option to buy few cheap items early to kind of snowball their advantage. So I would prefer my heroes not dying the first turn. But then again, there's less early removal and less ways to punish heroes that scale. So I'm not afraid to put heroes that are good at doing that, even though they have low health or whatever, if they have a powerful ability, for example. And I think the best way you want to manage is that I I prefer to draft green decks where I'm kind of good at staying on my board and being ahead a little bit, and then I prefer to have a hero that's very good in a like 1 versus 1 battle on another lane. So say there's two heroes in the first lane, two heroes in the second lane, and one here in the third lane, and your opponent literally has the same opposition, two, two, and one. And then you have something like Lycan or Enchantress that are just good at kind of slowly netting advantage over the opposing hero in that lane. It will take over 1 versus 1, even though it doesn't practically do anything very powerful. And when that occurs and you can kind of keep the other lane stable, you're slowly gaining an advantage that are kind of hard to encompass. Because one of the easy ways to lose is that you basically place your heroes incorrectly in artifact, and I think that's like biggest choice you'll make over the game is okay, where am I gonna place my hero? And if you place your hero in the wrong spot, and if you can't like uh, kind of understand where your opponent's gonna put their hero, it can get wrong really fast. Say that your opponent has two heroes in one lane, um, that they will clearly be winning, and I have none. Sure, they'll win that lane, but those heroes will be hard to get from there to help their other two lanes. And if those heroes aren't good at scaling, and if they don't attack your tower a lot, say that they're a blue hero with weak attack power, or they're heroes that doesn't have creeps or doesn't hit towers harder, or wherever it can be, it gets a lot worse to have them placed over there because I'll win lane 1 and 2. So one of the best ways to kind of manage your game is kind of trying to understand how you'll place your heroes early, so you then can get a slight advantage in a third lane, which maybe is one versus one hero versus one. Say you'll maybe throw in an extra improvement on that lane. For example, Enchantress improvement, or whether it's something else that can slightly kind of tip tip your advantage in your direction. It's going to be a lot easier to kind of start taking control of the game.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the strategies that you see in a lot of limited games is you're trying to find a way to strand your opponent's heroes in a lane maybe that they've already won. So like he said, if you got two of your opponent's heroes in one lane and you're dead to that lane, as long as you can kind of deny them gold, you can really kind of keep those heroes stranded in that lane and then try to win the other two lanes.
Yeah, no, for sure. And there's that's one of the reasons why there's other heroes that are especially good in draft is that when your opponent tries to do that, they're actually good at punishing you leaving those two heroes alone. For example, say that you have Sorla Khan in your deck and you have Assault Ladders, and all of a sudden you, or maybe Disciple of Nevermore, that basically as a magic term overruns every turn, that increases the attack of all your creeps in that lane. Your clock, which means that the clock that it takes, or the amount of turns it takes for you to destroy your opposing tower, gets so much faster. If your opponent doesn't interact with you, can sometimes punish that. They leave two of your heroes alone in that lane, and all of a sudden you put a Disciple there, you put Assault Ladders, and then you kill your opposing Ancient Tower, the tower with 80 HP under the one with 40. And then your opponent is in the same position, but they think they've been clever putting your two heroes there. But instead, they kind of have to, some way, get a hero over there to protect, and then they're on the back foot trying to kind of keep it all together. So that's also that's kind of level 2, and that makes it so much more complicated, right?
Right, and that's the big thing too, is you have to play around your opponent's cards, and obviously knowing what you're up against is going to determine your strategy. So like you said, if you know that your opponent has Assault Ladders in their deck, you probably don't want to try to strand a black hero in a lane by itself, because then like, oh dear God, please don't allow a couple creeps to get placed in that lane, and now instead of doing 12, now they're doing 18 or 50, or it just gets out of control, especially with the Disciple of Nevermore, I think is his name.
Yeah,
the one that
that's the overrun guy.
Yeah, the overrun guy, or even in Mist of Avernus, that's the one thing I've seen happen quite a bit is someone will look like they're stranding a lane, and then they'll have a green hero in another lane, and they'll just cross lane a Mist of Avernus, and all of a sudden, like you said, you're on the back foot. Holy oh my God, now they're scaling +6 or +7 every turn.
Maybe you're winning the other two lanes, but it's going so slowly. Sure, you kill their heroes every second turn, and then they come back, and there's some new creeps that block, and it just takes forever to actually get that final positive damage in the tower, even though you're slightly winning. And then in the other lane, there will be maybe a scaling creep, like Lycan Creep, or Satyr Duelist, or whether it's, like you said, Mist of Avernus, or something overrun effect. So the most important thing when you place your hero and kind of figure out your strategy beforehand, because you can do that a lot in Artifact, is look at your opposing heroes, see their list, and kind of figure out whether I always have to contest every lane my opponent is playing in, or whether I can kind of race what they're doing and trying to avoid their heroes all the time. So that's kind of an interesting part for sure.
Yeah, and so tell me about how. So obviously you've been very successful playing Magic, and for everybody at home, I know Joel because we played together on a Magic the Gathering team called Team Revolution years ago. This is before he was famous, okay? This is before everyone in the world knew who he was and all of this stuff, and we're all just in a room in Hawaii hanging out, or I think in Spain. I think cool, yeah, that was a cool room in Hawaii. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah. Jamming. I don't even know how many people we jammed in that. It was like a 6-bedroom suite. Two men. Hey, there was a lot of money. There was a lot of Pro Tour winnings in that room. But anyway, the thing about it is, playing Magic for a long time, you've looked at playing more Artifact. So if you can talk to why you looked at Artifact, what interests you in it, and when I know you're not giving up Magic because that's insane, but how do you see Artifact fitting in your future for card games?
I think actually there is a good chance I'll play a lot more Artifact than I will play Magic. In all honesty, I think Artifact is just, it has all the strengths to kind of be easier to try to be professional with on another level. Like it has this amazing company, Valve, that has been behind it, and most of their esports and their tournaments has been kind of successful in the way they contribute money to the community, and the esports tournaments, like their international tournament, is of course insane. But behind that, there's a lot of like clever minds figuring out the compendium and how to make that prize pool as big as it is. So there's a lot of competence behind Artifact, which I definitely adore, and I think the game is, I mean, seriously amazing. I think so. Every tournament that I played, and I played since the game basically came out in pre-alpha, whatever you want to call it. I think I played almost all of them. The game has become deeper for every tournament. It's like in the first tournament, there's like, oh, everybody's playing this color, like literally, and then somebody does well with that, and that kind of like, oh, so you can play the game in that way. And then after the second tournament, the same thing happens. And then the same thing happens. And then the same thing happens. Like, it's insane. And now you just like, I don't even think it's the same game that I played the first like month that I'm playing now. It's just a different animal altogether. And I think that's interesting in the way, because it's only because the way the game is kind of constructed in the 3-lane department, and how the kind of architecture makes it so deep, and that kind of makes me more interested out of it. Like, there's been all these other games like Hearthstone, and there's been Eternal and Elder Scrolls and whatever it is, Legends, and none of them has kind of made me want to play them more than Magic or whatever. But I think Artifact is definitely the closest thing that I've come to that, and I'm kind of looking forward to delving more seriously into Artifact, honestly. Yeah, we'll see what happens.
Well,
I don't think I'll quit going to Magic Pro Tours, but it might, like, maybe my time estimation of how much I work with each game will slightly go over to Artifact in the end. There's a good chance. We're definitely getting there.
Well, you're gonna have. I mean, the thing for Artifact, and when I was talking to Richard Garfield about it, anybody at home hear me? I want to make sure that I don't know what the heck happened here. So, but we had some kind of issue. My video is not working, but we still have Joel here, and we are going to get. It's all that matters. I mean, we have the good looking one here. So I'm just going to be behind the scenes, and I'm invisible now. I have cast a cloak on myself. And anyway, so what I was saying is Richard Garfield really wanted to do a lot of things with Magic. He really did. There was like all of these really cool ideas he had, but there was no way to implement them in what, like, he had cards, right? There was no digital back in 93 or even before that. Right. So there's a lot of things that are in Artifact now that are Magic mechanics. So, like, the way that we cast spells in Artifact is essentially the same exact thing that's in Dominaria, where you have legendary spells. Like, you have to have a legend in play in order to cast this spell. Now,
I never thought about it that way, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah, that's like the first thing I talked to him about was like, dude, how come you just took the Dominaria mechanic and put it into he's like, because I was the lead designer, dumbass. And so yeah, he said that would be like the best way to explain it on that side. But Joel, on your side, what Magic? Because obviously you've played a lot of Magic. Oh, let me fix Joel's volume.
Some of that goes on. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so tell me about what strategies and what skills from the Magic side that you're using a lot on the Artifact side.
I thought it was gonna be a lot easier to transfer my kind of Magic skills, and I thought I was gonna be ahead a lot. in the early stages of testing. But it's weird how much of the same resource dependent of a card game it is, and how also different it is. I don't know. I thought I was gonna be more ahead than I was, honestly. However, there is a lot of the same kind of resource management that there is in Magic, and I think in Magic it's easy to, when you're a beginner or when you're starting for the first time, you're kind of casting everything that you can cast as soon as you can cast it. And now it's kind of the same thing, same way in Artifact. And I think from playing Magic, I've been better at learning faster on when to wait for when to cast something or what to save it for, etc. And I, for example, in Magic, you can see maybe after your opponent plays one of like first two mana sources, you can kind of figure out what they're playing if it's an established constructed format. Well, in Artifact, you can kind of see what they're playing from your opposing heroes.
Right.
So then you can kind of figure out like, oh, I gotta save the Slay because my opponent is playing Lycan, and I probably want to be able to beat this wolf before it runs rampant or whatever it is, you know. And so that's kind of a big thing to think about. And I think that while initiative and priority in Magic and Artifact doesn't exactly work the same, they kind of remind each other about each other. Like in Magic, there's instance, right? And in Artifact, there's initiative. And in Magic, it's better to have a proactive kind of game state where you can use cards or attack with creatures slash minions into opposing ones and force them to move first, kind of. And while in Artifact, there's some amount of initiative going the same way. Like in Magic, it's good to be first, but in Artifact, it's weird because it's kind of better to be on the draw in the early game because you want your opponent to play their thing and then you can maybe react to it. And for like, it could be anything, right? But then later, it's better to be able to play your thing first, or you gotta know what you're gonna save everything for and which time you gotta do everything. So that's a big part that you can learn from Magic, even though you don't do it the same way. Like concept is similar. Yeah.
Yeah, I
So
think
there's that.
for me the biggest thing with Magic to Artifact is learning how to learn. And
Yeah.
for years we've learned how to evaluate cards and evaluate a metagame and things like that. And with as a longtime Magic player coming to Artifact, you have this idea of how cards are supposed to be evaluated, but you need to have your metrics, right? And I think that's where everybody's learning is what are the metrics that I'm supposed to be comparing these cards to? Like how do I get myself in a bunch of situations where I know if this card will be good or not? And
that's way harder, by the way.
right, no, that's super. Like there is if you took like let's say the top 75 Gauntlet players right now and
Yeah.
told them to give a ranking of all of their cards and all of their heroes, there would be a consensus like at the top maybe three or four heroes there would be.
Sure.
And cards, there would be the same way, top 3 or 4 cards. But after that, there would be like this chasm of like evaluating. Because like, for example, Rix. Rix is a really good example of some people hate Rix and some people love Rix. And when I'm splashing, I love Rix because I want to make sure I can cast whatever it is I want to cast every time, right? And but on the same token, there are times when that's bad because his card is not that great, right? Like so you have to like is my card that I'm splashing green for worth dealing with Rix's crappy card? But on the Magic side, it's really nice because like what Richard did is he took a lot of these things he wanted to do in Magic, which was unlimited hand size, unlimited board size. So you don't have to worry about like in Hearthstone, you can only have enough, enough space, right?
Yeah.
And also being able to modify a card that if it dies, it'll come back. It'll still have that. Like doing that in Magic is like would be impossible. It's hard enough to deal with what's on the board in Magic, like being able to just make sure your Tarmogoyf is the right power and toughness. It's hard enough in Magic to do that. But in Artifact, what are you finding is what you don't like about Artifact? Because obviously everybody talks about what they do like because we're all hyped and because it's a great game. But what don't you like about Artifact?
Ooh. Crap, I'm so honestly biased towards Artifact being great that
Me
it's
too.
kind of hard. I mean, honestly, I think one of the things that some people may find hard is that. So, for example, I mean, a similarity. When you play some games back in the days, and they were like overly complicated, or something like StarCraft, or maybe chess, or whatever it is, the reason why you play it and continues to get beaten over and over is because you think it's cool, and then you like playing it with friends, and you want to get better, and you want to win over them, or whatever it is. Like, you have all this energy to continue to play it. However, it's when you get older, it's kind of rough to get into a game that's hard to learn, and then mostly the better player will win, even though there's some RNG involved, of course. So I think in Artifact, it can be sometimes punishing to feel that you're gonna not understand what's important after a little while. I feel like I think Artifacts are very easy to learn, like the basics, but I like getting better at it, or getting over that first kind of milestone into being, a fine player. I think that's a little bit maybe steeper than other games. But yeah, I guess that's basically it.
Well,
it can get hard to kind of, but I feel like that's similar to a lot of other games. I'm not sure that's a good argument.
no, but that's what I feel too. Like,
Yeah.
I love Artifact. I think it's a great game. The RNG is
Mhm.
manageable, and you can. The good thing too is
Very
that you
much
can.
so.
Well, you can add cards to your deck to help mitigate RNG too. Like, you can play
Yeah.
cards that change your attack arrows and that kind of
Mhm.
stuff.
Yeah.
So, but
Breaks locked.
but the hard part about Artifact is you can learn how to play. Like, I can sit you down right now, and I can teach you how to play Artifact probably in about 10 or 15 minutes, like just the basics. The ramp up period from basic learning to winning your first match or first game against like a human, even against the bot, is hard because
I know.
you don't know just
You don't understand why what you're doing is wrong, and you feel like you're doing everything right, but then your opponent does something that you just don't understand how they became good, in the
right.
beginning, and it's weird.
Yeah,
Like, you're like, but I killed all my opposing heroes every turn,
right, and I still
but I'm
lost.
losing very, very a lot, and that's kind of interesting, Like, as I said earlier, as every tournament progressed and as the game was out for more and more months, I learned so many. Like, I built one deck that is elusively being called a combo deck, which it is. It is. I think it's the first combo deck we've had and the only one we've had in testing. Maybe, I'm not sure, but it was good. But that deck literally tried its, or it didn't try its best, but its plan was to lose every hero in the beginning. Like, it just lost its heroes, and it didn't care at all. And for me to think like that about a deck in the beginning of the alpha or beta or whenever I started playing, it's just I would never encompass such a idea even. So that's kind of, there's so many like steep levels that you don't understand in the beginning, but as soon as you're grasping, you're kind of like, oh, it's like you can almost compare it to math. It's like very frustrating whenever you don't understand it, and then you bang your head against a problem so many times that when you finally understand how it works, it's like the most satisfying feeling ever.
Yeah, it really is because you get it. Artifact will frustrate you, but it frustrates you for a different reason than it frustrates you when you play Magic or you play Hearthstone.
Oh yeah,
Like,
oh yeah, for sure.
Magic frustrates me because I get mana screwed and I don't get to play, or I get mana flooded, or some variation of that in a game that might have been close, and like, because close games of Magic, even when you lose them, they don't feel that bad, right? You go, oh, I made a mistake here or there, and you can get over it. It's the games where you're not even playing that are super frustrating. And in Artifact, it doesn't really feel like I have too many of those games. Like, so I played a draft game against you, I think it was yesterday, where I felt like I was ahead in that game, like 85, 90% of that game.
I messed up a few times. I remember this.
Yeah,
game.
like, and I was like,
in my defense, I was very tired.
Well, okay, I see how it.
Okay.
I was really tired, so that's why you had any chance.
Yeah,
anyway,
never mind. I did some major mistakes I'm not proud of. Let's tell you that.
Yes, there were some mistakes, and then and then in the very last turn of that game, I realized that I wanted to play one particular card, and I played the 7 drop instead. Because I knew for a fact, I was like, okay, he's gonna move over his Wyvern and this, and I need to have something to put in front of it, and I had it all planned out, and I just did the wrong thing, right? And that's okay. Yeah. Like, I felt, even though I lost, I was still cool.
Very
like,
close.
Right. Like, I felt like, yes, and everybody at home, I do know that you can't see me because we're having an issue on that part of it. But anyway, so yeah, like, I felt like I was in that game, but even though I think in the very beginning it was snowballing in my favor, but it's easier in Artifact to, when you have a lot of experience, which you do, you're able to actually develop a line in order to win that game still. Right. Yeah. Because that's how it was.
The 2 things about that is, like, the first thing, which is interesting if you compare with Magic, is that whenever you lose a very close game, you just know you messed up somehow. You know you fucked up, like, for sure. Like, because the game has been long, there's been a lot of there's been some technical decisions, but more overly, which is much more important to Artifact than any other card game, is that there's tons of strategic decisions, and those are the most interesting ones, or most giving ones, and like, they're very diffuse sometimes, but the strategy of your game plan was most important in this Artifact, which I think is a very hard thing to kind of capture in any card game. And so that's an interesting thing. You know, like, oh, if I didn't put my hero there, this wouldn't have happened, and blah 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 blah, blah, like a few turns later, etc. Right? So that's super. What was the other thing you were talking about? I had another point, but I forgot about it there.
Well, no, just talking about getting back into games and not...
Right, yeah. So that's the thing about the Artifact architecture, about how the game kind of develops, is that the way your opponent snowballs and gets ahead, aka getting an advantage on the board, but especially killing your opposing heroes, is also the comeback mechanic. In the same thing. It's weaved together. And which makes it super interesting, right? If your opponent destroys your hero, you have the option to move it somewhere else, and maybe you get an advantage because now you're better positioned. Like, it's a big part of the game, and which makes it so much more interesting. And the second thing about comeback mechanics in Artifact is that almost all of the online or card games that I know, except for maybe Elder Scrolls, plays on one board or one lane. And since Artifact is developed between 3 different lanes, this is not exactly how it plays out, but pretty close, is that whenever somebody gets a huge advantage in one of the boards, it's divided by 3, right? All the time, because all 3 boards matter. Like, you do something incredibly powerful that turn in that lane, but then there's 2 other boards to care about also, so maybe you'll get an advantage there. So everything is divided all the time, so even though your opponent does something stupid, it might be fine anyways,
Right.
So I think that's kind of great.
Yeah, because sometimes you do make a mistake on a lane, and it's funny because in Magic, sometimes if you make a mistake early and you get too far behind, if you don't have AoE, you're dead. And in Artifact, it's actually, what I've learned is, it's the other way around. So, like, if you make mistakes, you want to make them early. You want to make, like, if your hero dies, you'd rather your hero die on the very first turn or second turn than on turn 6, when you need to make sure that kind of, it's a lot easier to do it that way.
Yeah, sometimes I've come upon situations in tournaments where I've I've had a weaker, like a blue weaker hero against my opposing red hero, and I know they have ways to redirect their damage onto my red hero, but they usually want to wait to use it until they feel like the coast is clear. But then I proactively play something which taps me out or uses all my mana, in maybe a better artifact term. Um, so they know the coast is clear because I don't want to bait them into killing my hero so I can move it. And, they
Right.
think their game plan is revolving around that, but I kind of want that to happen. And that's kind of like an interesting mind game going on. Like, and then they won't have that card a few turns later that can actually be super annoying when I'm actually trying to do something that actually matters a lot in my own game plan. So I think there's definitely intricacies going on there for sure.
Yeah, and so I don't want to keep you forever because I'm sure you have other things to do. But what I wanted to do is spend some time maybe answering some questions
Sure.
from the folks in chat. So, guys, what I'm going to do is if you guys have some questions you want to ask myself or Joel, go ahead and type them into the chat. And while you're doing that, I want to let everybody know how the giveaway works, right? So everybody who's in the giveaway now is if you're a follower, you get 1 ticket. If you're a sub, you get extra 10 tickets, and we will give away a beta key in about 40-ish minutes on that side. Joel will probably not be here the entire time on that side. He's got life to do, but
Life's a thing.
yeah, this weird life thing.
Yeah.
But I just want to let you know that. And then if you look on my underneath in my Twitch profile, it'll tell you on the retweet side how to do that. All right. So here's some questions. Let me just scroll up here for a second. Do you think it's impossible to evaluate cards without actually having played the game? Like, for somebody who doesn't have a lot of experience, are there cards that you can just look at and know whether or not, or like they're just very basic, you'll know if they're good or bad?
I mean, yes and no. I think that it's hard because artifacts is so different in the way that kind of the strategies play out. So at first, I thought some cards were very powerful, and indeed they were, but maybe not in the way I thought they would be.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's definitely cards that are clearly better than others. Like, you can definitely see it. Like, oh, this card has a very minimal or very unique or effect that isn't usable in a lot of times, and you can kind of see that on the card sometimes. So you can definitely make some you can know some about the card's power level before you play the game, but you will rapidly like change your idea about some cards and the way they can be used after you started playing the game. So both yes and no, but mostly no.
Right?
Like,
Yeah.
you can't know for sure how good some cards are and some aren't.
Right. And I think the answer to that question is just what he said. Some cards you're going to look at, you're going to know they're busted. Like, you can look at Axe and know that Axe himself is great, and Berserker's Call is, woo, it's hot. It's hotness.
Yeah.
And but then there's other cards.
It's a good guy.
Yeah, but there's other cards that maybe you don't necessarily know are going to be good until they're in action. Like, I was not high on the Oath, and then I started playing it, and I just started crushing people with it. But you have to play it. You have to play it correctly. Like, I think there's a lot of cards in other card games where you just put the card out, it just does what it does, and you don't really have to think too far into it. And I think in Artifact, you not only have to know a card is good, but you have to know why it's good in the situation, and you have to be patient. You can't just like throw things out there. Like, you have to make sure you know why you're doing it and how it's going to affect your overall game plan.
For sure.
But
that's a big fan.
So another question is, I know what my average game duration is, but on your side, do you, obviously for people who are going to be reading the cards a lot, it's going to be it'll be longer games. But for you today, like in a tournament, what was your average game time?
I think it was between 15 and 25 minutes, maybe.
Yeah.
18 and 25, something like that. Yeah, per game.
Yeah.
But then I've had other constructed tournaments where a game has gone on for an hour, like some kind of insane game, that just goes on. And both people are trying to solve forever. And it's not common, but it does occur. It's kind of like Dota in that way, that Well, their games are a little bit longer, usually between maybe 25 and 30, 40.
Mm-hmm.
But their game can also go on forever, and this is the same way.
Yeah, I think that my average game was probably about 15 minutes in the tournament.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, sounds
and
about right.
but then I've had limited games that have been 40 minutes, but that's way like not normal.
And those games are so insane.
Right?
Like,
Yeah. And then
you
you're
have to like go to the bathroom and like
yeah,
like breathe in a paper bag and like
yeah.
you
You
know, like
got to wipe the sweat
as
off.
long as long as the game goes on, the decisions become so much more important. Like every time you move a hero somewhere, you're like, oh my god, this can get so wrong. Like I hope he doesn't have or she doesn't have X, Y, and whatever, and
Yeah, because
I
you're
hope they place their hero there and whatever. And it's just
yeah,
absurd.
it's so absurd. And so one of the questions I want to know, and this is as somebody who's preparing for this tournament this weekend, is how do you value items? Like when it comes to two ways. Not only just how do you evaluate items when you're drafting, but how do you evaluate items when you're building your decks? Because a lot of people don't know that you do get basic items. So it's not like just the items you draft in your draft. You also have like a separate set of basic items you add to your deck, like basic heroes. So how do you feel about when you should be drafting items in the draft, and then on top of that, you know, with the basic items, how do you fill those in?
So I think I pick regular cards and heroes almost over every item, except a special few, because some of the basic items, especially Traveler's Cloak, which gives you 4 health for 3 gold, I think, is so good.
Mm-hmm.
And also, now that we're drafting 5 packs, which makes it a little bit harder to get all your playables together, it's important to kind of, even though you don't have a powerful card to pick in your colors, if you don't have a lot of your heroes early, so you know which colors you're gonna be, it's important to pick up great cards outside of other colors in case you open a powerful hero or if you have a splash. And then you want to make sure you don't play crappy cards, because crappy cards are a lot worse than crappy items. But then again, there are some items like Helm of the Dominator maybe that are like very good,
Right.
right?
Insane.
Yeah, like great and limited, like for sure. Or maybe if you have a gold strategy, then Horn of the Alpha is amazing. You know, there's some items that are definitely like that I'll pick over a splash card if I maybe become a color, but there are not many, and I don't think you should pick them very highly.
Right.
Items, that is.
Yeah, I don't. I tend to only take like the S tier items, right? Like the items that you know are going to break the game if you get them. And now, but when I build my decks, I also tend not to play the armor item.
No,
like,
me neither.
Like
maybe one sometimes because my configuration of items are weird. But
right, I have one. Like I used to play 3 just to try to cycle through my item deck. But then I found out the card's just not very good, and the life one is just so much better. Like,
I mean, it depends. Like sometimes you want to have, as you said, cycle through your item deck because maybe you have 2 Helm of the Dominators and you're playing a gold strategy, so you want to make sure you get them from your shop, like when you have the gold available to buy them. Or it can be anything, right? Maybe you have, because there's 3 different type of items, and so there's this hard one, I don't know what to call it especially, and then there's armor, and then there's a weapon, and your hero can only have 1 of each. So if you have 3 weapons and 6 or 5 hard things, maybe you need to put an armor item in there so you don't have an overwhelming amount of too many of the same type of item that you actually can use. So
right.
There is some of that, but the armor one is definitely maybe the worst one.
Yeah, yeah. Trinkets are so much better than the armor ones.
Oh, it's trinkets. Okay. Yeah.
And
all right, I'll call it that from now on.
No, I just learned what the name of it was like 2 days ago. So don't worry about that. So here's actually a good question, and it's something that I think that doesn't get talked about enough, is the bluffing mechanic like that happens when you're playing. Because, and for people who are wondering what I'm talking about, bluffing happens a lot in Artifact because there's a situation where let's say you have initiative and you have your mana available and your opponent will also have his mana available. In Limited, this happens all the time. It's like there's a turn where there's a staring contest, and it's whoever acts first is going to lose, right? So you will pass sometimes bluffing that you don't have anything to try to see what they have, because
Yeah.
on one part they might just pass priority again, and then if you both pass, you're on to the next turn. Nobody wants to do that, right? So that's where items come in too. So
Yeah, cheap items.
cheap items, right?
Especially.
So
Yeah.
Joel, could you talk about how cheap items play into the bluffing game as well as the initiative game?
Right. So the thing that Rob is talking about is basically you have an important lane that both players want to win, and it's gonna direct the course of the game. But none of, and this happens more in draft than it does in constructed, is that none of the players have an effective way to deal with your opponent casting spells. Like they can't kill you, all of your heroes, so they will be able to cast all of their spells that they want to cast, right? However, if you have a powerful effect like a slay, for example, at your opponent's powerful creature, or if you have a Helm of Dominator that you want to save for last, or you don't want to cast it before your opponent can actually kill your hero before you can activate it, stuff like that. You want to play small effects that keeps passing the priority to your opponent while gaining small advantages. For example, if you have tons of cheap items, like later in the game, you will get more gold, so then you can maybe have 5 or 6 cheap items in your hand. And every time you cast one of them or use an ability or cast a card, you pass your priority to your opponent. And every time you do so, you gain a small advantage, which pressures your opponent to actually do something, which you then can react accordingly to in the end. And that's kind of where the bluffing with item
Right.
kind of comes in. And this is like super deep because you need to know exactly what your opponent can do and what they've been playing up to. But this is definitely a thing. And yeah.
Yeah, you want to
Sure.
you'll realize that the thing that really makes Artifact difficult and why people will there's going to be a lot of people who start playing this game and they play for like a couple hours, and if they haven't read any content or they don't have a friend who showed them how to play, if you try to do it on your own, you're going to die. You're going to be so lost, and you're going to get super frustrated. And so you have to understand that there's going to be a lot of people who start this game and then quit and just never touch it ever again. But that's because there's so many balls in the air. There's so many things you have to manage. You have to manage gold. You have to manage initiative. You have to manage your cards. You have to manage your heroes. You have to manage creeps. You have to manage your lanes. You have to manage your future turns. And it's a lot of stuff to take in when you're first starting. And when we talk about limited, it's the same way. It's like you have to think about all that stuff that you need to manage in the future and then develop this game plan as you draft. But
Right.
one of the good things...
Sometimes, for example, you can, when bluffing, you can, for example, place, say that you want to gain an advantage in the middle lane, and then you're going to place your hero, and your opponent is a little bit ahead on the first lane, but you want to affect the middle lane the most because it's going to decide the victor. Then maybe even instead of placing her in the middle lane, which seems logical, right? Because then you have more pressure in that lane and you can maybe cast more spells or whatever it is. Maybe you want to place in the first lane to force your opponent to react to that hero, because that hero could maybe cast some kind of sweeper effect or maybe turn the pendulum on that lane over. Your opponent doesn't know. So even though your opponent has the initiative, maybe they'll use that initiative to deal with that hero, so make sure they'll win the first lane, but then you have initiative in the second lane. So sometimes sacrificing a hero versus a card and initiative can be worth it, and in kind of a bluffing manner to get ahead on the lane that actually matters even more for you. Yeah. So there is definitely a lot of levels there going on, which are interesting, and the initiative system really makes that all possible, I think.
Right, it wouldn't be possible without that. But tell me, I know how. I'm pretty sure I know how you're going to answer this, but being able to know exactly what's in your opponent's deck, like in limited, does that feel better or worse than Magic? Where in Magic you can have like you don't, or any of these other games, you don't know what you're up against all the time. So you're sometimes playing, you're planning against cards that don't even exist for your opponent. How do you feel that changes the game plans when you're playing limited?
I mean, it changes your game plan a lot, and I'm not sure how much better / worse it is. I think it's better to not have your opponent's list showing in the way. So there's two sides of it, right? In limited, there's different, or in Artifact as in other all the other card games, there's different rarities, and some cards are just going to be more uncommon to have in your deck than others. And playing around those cards in a limited format where there's a low chance they'll get them is going to be very hard. Like in Magic Draft, you're not going to play around the sweeper or a busted rare because there's such a low chance they'll have it. Correct. And if you know your opponent's deck list, you will have a better idea how to play around your opposing spells. And that definitely takes skill to do that. However, on the other hand, if you don't know what your opponent's doing, you gotta just have a general sense of what they can have. Like, sure, you know all the cards that are included by your opponent's heroes, but you don't know of the spells. Maybe this color combination makes it so that probably are playing this or that, but you can't know for sure. So that makes you have to rely more on your intuition rather than exactly trying to play around everything perfectly. But I think it's actually more close than you would expect. Which side of it is more skillful? I personally prefer to play more intuitively and not have hidden deck lists, but I'm not sure if it's correct. Like, I've
Yeah.
actually started to like having shown deck lists online because it's sometimes you'll just play around too much. Like, you'll just not go for it sometimes because you know your opponent can have something, and I think that there's a lot of skill involved in that too. So
Yeah, it's definitely
I'm not set on
weird.
the answer. I'm
No.
not set on that actually.
Well,
Lo and behold.
it's everyone is kind of on the fence about it because so many of us are used to never seeing a deck list. And we've grown up in card games where you just have to play around everything that's in that color. Like, you just have to. Like, if and you basically say if they have it, they have it, right? Whether or not you know
Or
they
the
have it or
general
not.
sense of that. For example, in Magic, they maybe have a pump spell. You don't know which one it is, but you can expect them having some kind of trick that will win them combat if they're attacking like they are. For example, like
Right.
yeah,
Like, you could have there's so many different things you can play around, and but I do also like, because we have all these boards and we have all of these battlefields we're trying to manage, being able to know what my opponent's deck list can do and what their game plan may be, it's very helpful. So, like, if I know,
yeah,
like, almost always play like the blue black really go wide strategies in Artifact. So the very first thing I'm looking for in my opponent's deck list is to see, do they have any AoE? If they do, how many do they have, and what color is it in? So I know that I'm not going to
right,
commit super hard to the lane that has that.
yeah.
And
For
also,
ex-
go ahead.
Another thing that's interesting is, for example, in the tournament, I played against another great player, and I think we were playing 2 rounds before top eight, or maybe it wasn't top eight. And my opponent had, you could see their entire deck list, right? And I knew my opponent had a Helm of the Dominator. And when I could see his gold going from exactly, okay, he bought a Helm of the Dominator now, we both kind of played around him having it for several turns. For example, I never tapped, I had a black hero in that lane for several turns, and I never tapped out from under 6 mana because if my opponent played it, it would take over that lane, and if he played it, I wanted to coup de grace the hero that played it.
Right.
So in that way, because I knew his deck list and that he had that item in his deck, because otherwise it could have been another item costing 19 gold, for example, that led to this super weird game state. And he didn't play it either. And at some point, I don't know. I think I kind of told myself that, oh, now I kind of had to play it because otherwise, blah blah blah, and then I lost because of it. So it's like, you know,
Well,
and I bang my head
when we're
against the wall for doing that. But
right, exactly. It's your fault. You did it. And but when you're drafting, how do you evaluate like the lower mana cost spells? Because we start at 3 in Artifact. How do you manage, like, normally in Magic when we look at 1 and 2 cost spells that are good, we know that they're great, right? And but in Artifact, is it different because we start with 3 mana, or is it about the same?
yeah, it's super different, I think, and also because there's several different lanes and the combat mechanics are like they're better developed in Artifact, like more architecturally, makes cheaper spells a little bit worse. Honestly, I think you need
Yep.
kind of a curve from up to down. You can't just only have cheap spells in Artifact, or as far as I know, I haven't built such a deck to be working yet. But it's just, if your opponent comes back and you only have cheap spells in your deck, you're gonna get overwhelmed pretty quickly. And if you change just a little bit to skew your favor in one lane, that favor, like that amount of being ahead is going to be also divided by 3, and you kind of need to go for more splash effects if you want to actually be ahead in the game.
Right. Well, the thing about these, the 2 mana and 1 mana spells, they have to be so much better than expensive spells to make your deck. So they have to like draw cards, like drawing cards. A cheap spell that does something and draws cards is excellent, because that way, you're cycling through your deck early and get to other really good stuff and have an ability. So that's like the baseline.
That's good, sure.
Right? Like cheap stuff that draws cards, I'm with that. The other one is cheap stuff that affects the lane, like it will either combat RNG, like it will maybe change arrow direction. It will help you get something off of a lane or whatever. Doesn't matter. So that's where those 1 and 2 costs come in. Like if they don't do either of those, like I'm really not too much inclined to play with it, right? Like it's just
the times where 1 and 2 mana spells are good is if it's important for you to not get too far behind, or it's important for you to get ahead early, so you need X amount of spells that cost 3 or less to get into your deck to get an advantage. So you either want to play them on turn 1, or if it's 1 mana spells, you want to be able to double spell on turn 2 with a 3 mana spell and a 1 mana spell, or with a 2 mana spell, it's on turn 2 when you have 5 mana to play 2 spells, 2 and 3. Like, because that's so important, and if you can kind of hold that advantage, those spells can be good. But since it's pretty hard to do so, and people are having developed defenses or whatever it is, it's kind of hard to make them extremely good. I think the cheap mana spells, which is different from every other card game out there, honestly.
Right, and I think the other interesting thing too is there's no real super aggro like deck like there is in maybe like Hearthstone or Magic, where there's these like in the first 2 turns of Magic, you can sometimes drop, let's say, like if you could play a turn 1 3-1, a turn 1 3-2, or a turn 1 2-2, and then into a 3-3 or something like that, you can get ahead really fast, and control decks can just die. And then in Hearthstone, you can have these aggressive starts the same way, where you just spam the board, and if they don't draw a Wrath, or they don't draw AoE, they're gonna die. Where in Artifact, I don't really see that. There's no like, oh, I played this on turn 2, this on turn 3. I'm gonna win this lane, guaranteed.
I think there's ways to be super aggressive and get one lane down very quickly, and then once you have done that, it's kind of hard to break another lane or break into another lane, and using because then your opponent's gonna start getting to use their expensive cards that are like kind of hard to combat, or at least it's going to be easier for them to kind of protect themselves now they haven't been able to do so in the first lanes, especially since they didn't use their cards to protect themselves in the lanes you already lost. So I think that's kind of a built-in mechanic, so you often don't lose that extremely quickly. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think there's also like ways to, when you're building, for example, a control deck, that you actually have stronger heroes in combat than your opposing heroes, which is weird, right? Like, say black is by far the most aggressive color, but if your opponent plays a blue-red control deck, for example, they have all these red heroes to stop you in the early game and to kind of combat your heroes. And that's not the case in any other card game either. Like, in most other card games, your opponent's trying to kind of counteract what you're doing, and they have maybe filter spells, and then they try to play a big spell to take over the game. While in Artifact, your opponent's already starting with stronger minions or creatures, or in this case, heroes in play already. So that's, it kind of makes it very different, where you have to kind of evade what your opponent is doing instead of the other way around. So, yeah.
Yeah, being proactive is important to a degree, because if you get too deep into one lane, there's very few ways to get a creep off of a lane, like into another lane. Like you can't,
without spending too many cards.
Right, that's the problem.
Like, it's easy. Sorry to interrupt, but it's easy to do it. But then when you gotta do it again in another lane, it's gonna be hard to have enough cards. Like, see what I'm saying? Like,
right.
You can use a Slay in your opposing creeps. Let's block Sarlacon or whatever hero with high power you have, and then it's easy to get the lane fast. But then when you gotta start interacting with another lane, because usually it's easier to get two lanes because they have less life, of
Right.
course. You're gonna have use a lot of cards on three effects from your opponent being just randomly spawn melee creeps.
Right.
So,
Well, and how do you feel about the colors themselves? Like, do you feel like
they're balanced.
right, that they're balanced, or do you feel like there's
Yeah,
one
I think
color
so.
that's not quite as up to?
First I thought red was the easiest, strongest color, and then I thought it was green, and then I thought it was blue, and now black is starting to do some disgusting things because I think it's the most complicated color, maybe
Easy.
to at least know how to build correctly. So now I just don't know anymore. It's just close. I don't know, and also there's a very good chance that I just don't understand the game enough to know how to build a very aggressive deck. I mean, honestly, I've tried different things, but I think I might be too biased by the way I do it in Magic, and I think you can just maybe you have to think about it in another way in Artifact.
Yeah, and it's hard to build these aggressive decks. One, because aggressive decks are just hard, right? Because you have to find which two lanes you need to commit all of these cards to that are going to be stuck there if you play them there. Like your creeps that bonus your guys, or
Or
your
for example, if you're going to stop you, do you have a comeback mechanic? Like,
right.
can you just swing on a lane?
If you're right, if they sweep your board in that lane, what do? Like, is there a way for you to come back?
Or maybe that is your plan.
Right. Maybe that's the plan. Is to get them to burn it. Right. If you get them to burn their spell, then you decide to do it that way. So now I haven't played any constructed, so I wanted to talk to you just a little bit about constructed before you go. How do you feel about the last tournament that was constructed? I wasn't in the closed beta for that. So how do you feel about the state of constructed, and are we all playing limited now because there isn't a big constructed tournament, or is it because limited is great and people just don't want to play constructed?
No, I think the reason we're playing limited more now is clearly because of the tournaments. Next one being limited, the internal tournament, and I think they have kind of all the data they need from earlier constructed tournaments. There's been a lot more constructed tournaments than limited ones, and they just need a little bit more, limited data basically. So that's why we're playing it. I think constructed is great. I think it definitely works. There's different ways to camera different powerful decks, and I think that how many are we in the close? I don't even know. Like how many are we? 200, 300? I don't even know.
Yeah.
Some amount, and that's all gonna change when the game is released. I think that I don't know if the developers told us that or not, but I'm just gonna leave it out there that I definitely don't think we have like broken the format or
no,
we even have close to the most powerful decks. Like when it's gonna be released, that stuff is gonna go real fast. Like it's gonna change. Everything's gonna change. So
yeah, that
if
is
you think
definitely.
that you're so far behind the other players that have played the closed beta, no, definitely not. Like you gotta think of it this way: like when you played Magic back in the days without internet, for example, all the information you had was within your local group or maybe something you read out of the magazine, and then it was so hard to like understand everything, but now when there's articles, there's like deck text, there's deck list and everything, and it's going to be the same thing with Artifact. You're going to get all of this free information that the players in the closed beta or alpha, they just have to figure out by themselves,
right?
And that makes it take so much more time. So I think people are going to be fine.
No, and that is the argument, and that is exactly what I'm telling everyone. The closed beta is 1993. It is, you have to find people who are better than you. You have to talk to them about strategy. You have to get their article they wrote up for themselves, and get them to share it with you, and then learn from there. So like what would take normally like 2 weeks of reading content takes you like 6 months because somebody has to want to share it with you. And then also, even if they want to share it with you, you have to process it and apply it. Like, I don't get to go to a website and watch, let's say, like 5 hours of a video that somebody has edited, so you can see all of this interaction and whatever. And so you get to basically take all this knowledge that we have and apply it instantly. So Constructed, I think it's going to be very easy to catch up in Constructed because you can pick your deck, you can play the hell out of it and move on. Now Limited, Limited is hard in general, even in Magic. Like there's,
for sure,
what is there, like infinite knowledge out there on how to play Limited, but people still aren't good, right? Because you still have to play the games. You still have to quickly be able to make your deck and things like that. So Artifact is not going to be different.
Like you were saying, it's the same kind of argument I made for Magic. Is I love to say this because people ask me a lot of the time, is that like what's important to make you a good like Magic player, or what's the kind of base you need? And then I always say that you got to play Limited. Just play tons of Limited, draft and whatever. It's the same with Artifact, right? Because then you learn all of the interaction of even the worst cards and how to apply that later. But more importantly, you learn the game Magic or Artifact or whatever it is. If you get handed a deck from a friend and it's like, this card works like that, this card works like that, this is good against this, and then you play that for, say, 1,000 hours, you get great at the game called Blue-Black Control or whatever. But as soon as you have to switch or apply something new or the metagame change, you're lost. So you don't have a solid base to stand on. And without that, you don't know how to intuitively break a format or get ahead or whatever it is.
Right.
So
yeah,
it's important to get the fundamentals of a game from Limited or playing basic, all different basic decks or whatever it is. You just gotta know where to start and get that like fundamentals.
Right.
The playing base, yeah, for sure.
And you guys are going to learn a lot just playing against the bot with pre-constructed decks.
Oh yeah, the deck that we kind of broke the tournament with, I barely played against a player. I played it against bots like, I don't know, 100 times.
Right.
It's like so much, just to see how everything plays out, because that's the hard thing to understand about Artifact. When you're building a deck in Artifact, you not only do you have to choose which spells you need, but you also need to choose which heroes, which are going to affect like your curve, and you're gonna know like how to place your heroes, which is more importantly, like you choose which heroes you start the game with, and they're randomly placed on the board, and then you choose which hero comes in first and then second, and that just change everything how your deck is constructed. Maybe you have 3 green heroes starting, and then you only have cards that cost 4 mana that are blue, because then you have a hero coming in that's blue, and all of these things changes, and you understand that a lot easier. You just gotta play a lot of games, and sometimes it doesn't matter if it's against a human or a bot. You just gotta see how things plays out.
Right, and you can give the bot whatever deck too, right? Can't we do that? I don't remember. Yeah, so like if I need to play again, and that's like for me, it's the best. It's the best part, because like if in Magic I was playtesting let's say I built a deck and I could just give the bot like mono red and it would play it competently, and I could just jam those for like hours on end, like I would be so good so fast, like with that matchup, that I would be happy.
Yeah. I mean, sure, you're gonna get some skewed results,
right?
Because the bots are,
they're not perfect.
Most of the time always gonna be worse than your opponents in real life. So maybe you're not gonna have the 75-25 matchup that you expected, but at least you're gonna know the interactions between the cards, which are the most important part.
Right. That's the big thing, is knowing how your deck plays. And the thing, and the bot, so the Artifact bot, I need to give it a name eventually, but like the Artifact bot like is not bad. It is not bad. It will beat your ass when you're first starting. Like if you put it on like the high level when you first start, you will lose games. It's not like you're auto guaranteed to beat the bot when you're first starting.
Yeah, it took me a long while to beat the bot on the hardest difficulty. Like it took me like I even had to brag about it.
Right.
I'm like, look at this, and they're like, whoa, really? It took me such a long time trying.
Yeah, you have to call a friend and be like, dude, can you believe it?
Dude, you know what happened?
I just beat the bot on expert mode. It's like beating the game. Yeah, that tells you how crazy it is. So like if you're just like at home and you're trying to queue up a game and you can just like play against the bot and test your might against the bot. And but it's good.
Yeah, they're confident. They miss some things, but I gotta add that the hardest difficulty of a bot, they draw like more cards.
Right.
They have, they start with more resources. So that's why that becomes especially much harder. But the kind of AI idea, I think, is competent enough for you to understand the interactions. They're not gonna ever be better than a medium plus good player, but maybe at some point, but
yes,
not right now at least.
The bots are free to play. You don't pay to play the bots. I mean,
Exactly.
it's
Yeah.
You'll be able to, and that's a good thing too. Is like when you first start, you can just jump in, play against the bot. If you lose, no big deal, and learn. Like, so I think that part is good.
Some of the best things with playing against bot, especially if you need to know how your deck plays out, is you can jump in and then you can see on turn 2, oh, this didn't play as the way I wanted. Quit the game, change a 2 cards, get in again, and then click. Because the bot is also they're gonna have their response instantly. Like, they're not gonna sit there and think. They're just gonna do the thing. The games goes very fast also. So I think that's great.
Yeah, it makes you feel kind of dumb sometimes.
They're not gonna rope you,
Yeah, they're not gonna BM you with the bot. Just BMs you. It's like, oh, it has lethal. No, I'm gonna throw another 50 power on the board, and then 4,000. Exactly. Was that you? I heard that. Was that you who had win on board and then decided to try to throw an extra 5,000 damage on? I don't know. That could have been you. I don't know.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to beat the record of dealing the most damage in one game, and I think I dealt 2,000-3,000 or something. But then my friend, he kind of put him with the same deck and he helped building, by the way. I think he dealt 10,000 damage in my turn now.
10,000 damage.
That he could do more.
I have not seen that. 10,000 damage. I don't even. Good God, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's the deck can do some broken things sometimes.
Yeah.
So the hard thing about dealing 10,000 damage is that you first have to deal 40, right?
Right.
So you can't. You have to kind of amass a board towards where you deal lethal damage, and then turn after it has to increase
exponentially
by a lot, right? Yeah. So you kind of want to deal 10, then 3k, and then 10k,
right?
Because it's gonna do less damage or whatever in tower. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know that we can explain exactly how the deck works, but just know. Yeah, exactly.
You'll have to follow me if you want to know that in the future.
Exactly. You're going to have to follow his Twitter and his when he streams. You'll have to do that when the NDA drops. You'll have to go to his side because he'll show you that side.
Tell you about that. It's a spicy one, though.
Right. Well, okay. So we've only have about 8 minutes left before I do this drawing. So I'm gonna one more question. When in Magic they wanted to build, or in Hearthstone they wanted to build a game where someone who is new had a chance against somebody who is experienced, right? There's RNG in there that can make it so that they don't feel like they're always going to lose. In Artifact, I do not feel that. I feel like if you're new, even if your deck is really good, especially in Limited, you will get destroyed by people who have mediocre to bad decks. How do you feel about the skill, the ability to be a skilled Artifact player, and what it means to maybe be a pro Artifact player? Is there enough skill cap to be a pro?
Yeah, definitely. I think so. I think that's what's makes me the most interested about the game. I think it's so deep, and I think the roof is going to be so high that it's just going to be that interests me a lot. In Magic, there's this clear variance where the best players in the world have 66 to 68% win percentage against the other best players in the world.
Right.
Not the best, but the medium to best, that plays the largest tournaments like Grand Prix and Pro Tours or whatever. I think in Artifact that can be different. I think it's gonna be clear who's better, and maybe you can get some RNG to win anyways, but not most of the time, which I think that's super interesting. But even then, there's gonna be different tiers of small tournaments in the game where worse players can play against worse players and then get better and level up through the game. So I don't think you should be too afraid about getting bashed 100 times before you can win a a lane, you know?
Right.
There's gonna be players of all different calibers playing, and you're just gonna slowly have to go up.
Yeah, and I think that would, because there's no ladder per se, and that's what they've said. They don't want to have like a grindy ladder, but I would think that there has to be like an elo rating.
Do you know if it's released how they're gonna do it? I have some ideas.
I have some ideas, but they haven't said anything. What's your idea? What do you think?
Well, I know what they've kind of said, but I'm not sure if I can.
No,
I can say so I'm not gonna say it.
No, you can't say what. No, so you can't say what we've been told may be an option.
Right.
But what about?
No, I'm just gonna pass.
Okay, just pass. Yeah, I think. I think
it becomes too weird.
Right.
I don't want to speculate because I like their idea a lot, so I kind of wish I thought it myself. So
right.
It's just gonna be weird if I say something 17 or something.
Yeah, I think the big thing is that you just need to put time in. You've got to be able to know what all your cards do, and you just got to get reps. You really have to get reps in. Yeah. But the good thing is that for everyone who's starting, if they're not in the closed beta or they don't have a beta key or whatever, they will still be able to apply the things they read and the things they watch online and be able to play right after. So like, again, your learning curve is going to be so much faster than everyone else. So, and it's not like the $1 million tournament is like December 1, right? Like, you know, if it was, then yeah, you could bitch and moan all day if like, yeah, there's $1 million tournament December 1. Yeah, you would be screwed if that was the case, okay? But if the $1 million tournament, let's say, is April 1, you have no worries. You have like no problem. Like you should be able to put in, because right now I'm at about 100 hours in, and I know that there's people who I've beaten who are, 8-9 times as much time in the game that I have, and so I feel good about that, being able to apply my knowledge. But I think that for everyone else, you just need to understand. I know that you want to be in the beta key. I know you want to be in the beta. I know you want that availability. But just remember that people like myself, people like Joel, are going to be producing content that will make you a better player. Like, and it's not even close. Like, it will make you better.
Yep.
Yeah. So faux show. All right. So
I agree with everything. I don't really have anything to add.
Okay.
There's also gonna be different archetypes for every type of player.
Oh yeah.
There's just different ways to play this game. In so many ways.
Hey, so how many hours do you have?
I think I have like 450 or something.
Oh, so you don't have crazy hours. You don't have like the 1,000+ hours stuff going on.
No, it's not like Wife Coach or Hype.
Right? Yeah, Hyped is like Hyped owns me, by the way. Like, he gave me so much insight on how to play Limited, and
it's good. Yeah, sure.
And I've crushed so many people, but it's between you and Hyped. I'm like, all my X1s, that's where they come from, and I hate it. So I got to keep working. So anyway,
he's one of the better players. So is Wife Coach. They're also great at Limited. That's why I played them both, and at the kind of end tier of the tournament there.
Right, those are the end bosses a lot of the times. And so tell people at home or wherever they're at how to get a hold of you, and what your plans are, like if you're going to stream or whatever.
Yeah, so I have a partnership with Twitch, so I have planned to stream. I'm not sure I'm gonna do just yet because I've also started with school, so there's a lot of conflict of interest of where my time is going. But I think I want to try to stream and try to get that in there. And if people want to follow me there or subscribe, it's I think my stream name is called Joel Larsson. I think it's as simple as that, basically, in one word. And then you can follow me on Twitter at Joel Larsson 9091 on Twitter, and that's it.
All right.
You can see everything I have to say, or whatever you want to play, or whatever it can be.
Well, perfect. So, all right, guys, we got about 2 minutes. Thank you, Joel, for coming on. I know that you didn't have to take time to tell everybody how to get better at Limited. You didn't have to do that, and but it definitely is helpful for me too. So we do have a tournament this weekend in the closed beta on Saturday. We won't tell you the details of it, but we're all excited. Can guarantee that.
I'm definitely excited. It's going to be great. Yeah, for sure.
And when that's over,
Pleasure to be here. For
Yes.
sure.
Well, and hopefully we'll be able to have you again and actually be able to play some games or some things like that. But we'll see what happens in the future. So I'm going to let you go, and then from here we will do our drawing here in about a minute or so. So talk to you later, Joel.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
All right. See ya.